Hello, this is Melissa Barker. I'm a certified archives manager currently working at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives. I'm also known as the archive lady in the genealogy world. I'm here today to talk to you about disaster planning, safeguarding your genealogical records. Did you know that genealogists are also home archivists? Just like the archivists that work in the many archives, libraries, museums, and university archives, we as genealogists also do some of the same jobs and are responsible for some of the same records that many of our wonderful archivists are. Just like archivists, we collect historical and genealogical records. Things like the Lyle family records collection you see in this photo. This photo was taken at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives, and it depicts many types of records that were part of this family records collection, things that you may have in your own records collection and your family. Another similarity between a home archivist and a regular archivist is that we collect photographs. All of us love to find photographs for our family members. And so photographs are one of those things that we as genealogists try to collect. Archivists do the same thing. They love to collect photographs of the people that have lived in the area where their expertise, and also of buildings, churches, and schools. We also receive records from others. Just like archivists who receive donations from the public, genealogists will sometimes also receive things from other family members, whether those are inherited records or those are records that we have been given by cousins or aunts and uncles. These records are very precious. And so even to an archivist and also to a genealogist who is a home archivist, these records that are donated, collected, and preserved are very important to us. This is a photograph of the late historian's non-family records collection. It came to the archives from her attic of her home after her passing. We were so grateful to receive these records at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives. But as you can see, they came fresh from the attic. So we have to do some preservation work, and we have to make sure that these records are preserved for the future. Also, we collect, organize, and preserve photographs, ephemera, and artifacts, just like a regular archivist does. We have these items in our homes and our records collections, and we need to make sure that these records are taken care of so that future generations can enjoy them and that they survive. This is a photo of the Tennessee Supreme Court records at the Tennessee State Library and Archives when I was attending the Archives Institute. The red arrow is actually pointing to my hands that I'm cleaning these records as I was being taught how to be an archivist. As you can see, we are wearing gloves. We're not going to talk about gloves in this presentation, but if you prefer to wear gloves because it makes you feel better about handling your records, please by all means do so. We at an archivist level like to take great pains in taking care of our records, and so we ask that genealogists do the same. Most archives actually have a disaster plan in place, and this disaster plan is also reviewed each and every year. So this is a reason why we ask genealogists to maybe even put a disaster plan in place where you live, making sure that your records are safe and secure and will be taken care of no matter what might come their way. If our archives are very much concerned about preparing for disasters, shouldn't genealogists also be concerned and prepare for any disaster that might come to them and that might could damage or destroy their own genealogical records? There are a couple of types of disasters that can befall your records. First and foremost are natural disasters. Of course, these are disasters. There's not anything that any of us can do anything about. They are natural and they happen as a natural process. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there are natural disasters all around us. Some of them are more prevalent in certain areas than others, but they do happen, and they happen sometimes very frequently. So we must be prepared to preserve our genealogical records from these natural disasters. Some natural disasters that you may think about are flooding. This is a photo from the 2010 flood that happened in Tennessee. This is a photo that I took of that flooding in my area. Floods can be extremely damaging to genealogical records. Tornadoes. Tornadoes are swift, they're fast, they come through and they do a lot of damage. And it's not something that we can always prepare for. And so it's important for us to remember where we are living, what natural disasters come our way in those particular areas, and try to safeguard our records accordingly. Hurricanes. Many of us live in areas where there are hurricanes each and every year. They are predicted. However, sometimes it's difficult to get our records to safety. Earthquakes. Earthquakes is another disaster that can happen without a moment's notice, and one that we may not see coming. And so it's important for us to take those records that we have in our possession and get them in a form or a fashion that they can survive this disaster and live on to the next generation. Again, we cannot control natural disasters, but sometimes we have warnings, and we can also prepare. We can prepare for these disasters if they come or if they don't. And so it's important that genealogists who are home archivists be prepared and take care of the records that you have in your care. Another type of disaster is a man-made disaster. These disasters are done by humans. Ones that are done by human-made disasters can be defined as a disastrous event caused directly or indirectly by one or more human actions. Some examples of a man-made disaster are a water leak that causes flooding in your home. I've seen this many times, and it's something that sometimes causes so much damage to records that it's irreversible. Moisture that causes mold in the home. Sometimes we don't even see this kind of damage until we do work in our home and we find the mold. So it's important for us to make sure that our homes do not have the moisture in them so that can cause this mold. Fire. Fire into a home and is most devastating. My husband has had 3 different house fires during his lifetime in his family, and so they have lost a lot of family memories, a lot of family records, and so it's important that we try to prepare for such disasters. A computer meltdown. This is a man-made disaster that sometimes we don't think about, but we should. So it's important that we realize the computers will not always be there for us. Sometimes we have to take steps to make sure that our digital records are just as protected as our paper records. In some cases, we can prevent man-made disasters in our homes, which will safeguard our genealogical records. For me, my number one step to any genealogist, home archivist in taking care of your records and information is digitization. It is the number one records preservation step that you can take to help to preserve the essence of your records, photographs, and ephemera. I would encourage you to digitize all original records first, and then digitize all of the copied records. This way you get those original records, sometimes they're one-of-a-kind records, digitized and taken care of first. Once you've gotten those records, then I would suggest you move on to any copied records that you have received from repositories, other family members, and to digitize them all together. I encourage you to use a flatbed scanner or a digital camera, something that is helping your records to remain flat, and also so that is not a device that you're going to be feeding the documents through. Even if this feeding mechanism is brand new, or if the document is pretty secure or pretty stable, I have seen many documents getting eaten by these types of scanning devices. So it's important that we use a flatbed scanner, a digital camera, or some other device that does not allow our records to feed through the device. Put the digitized records on an external device, such as an external hard drive, a thumb drive, etc. This will help us to digitize those records, preserve them, and also help us to have them in several different places. Save the digitized records in an online cloud-based storage area. As we like to say, we like to store it in the cloud. This keeps it off of your computer in case you have that computer meltdown. It also helps you to retrieve those records anywhere that you may be. So it's important that we get our records out of our computer onto a cloud-based storage so that they can be retrieved. Digitizing our genealogical records will save the information contained on the records themselves. It may not save the actual records, but if you have them digitized, they can be easily retrieved if disaster strikes. Another thing I like to tell genealogists is to get your records out of the house. Now, we don't always think about getting our records out of the house, do we? But we have our records in a certain place in our house. And so it's important that we try to get them out of our house. I would suggest you give a copy of your digitized records to 3 relatives or friends. This can be in the form of a thumb drive, an external hard drive, or maybe send them to them in an email or some other sort of a cloud sharing storage area online. Once you've digitized the records, share them with 3 of your friends or relatives, ask them to store them away, and if you ever needed to retrieve them, you can contact your friend or relative to retrieve those records. Place a copy of the digitized records maybe in a safe deposit box at a bank. This is also a great way to get your records out of the house and maybe in a safe place. What you need to remember is that as digitization mediums change, you need to change with the times. So for instance, if you have something that is on a cassette tape, you need to move that to the digital method. Or if you have something on a VHS tape, you may need to have it converted. So it's important that we keep up with what the digitalization records of the times is and what's the best for preserving our records. I would also encourage you to donate a copy of your digitized records to local archives, a library, a historical society, or a genealogical society. I would seek out that facility that is where your ancestors lived. I would also contact the facility, talk to them about their donation policies, make sure that they do accept such donations, and ask them if they would like to have the records. So let's talk about protecting the original records. Climate controls is the most important part of protecting our records. Do not store records in a basement, attic, or garage. These are not ideal places for storing records. The reason being is because of the temperatures and the humidity levels in these areas can fluctuate wildly, and they need to be consistent. I would suggest you just store your records at the coolest part of your house. Now, not all of us can live in an archives where it's very cold, but I suggest that you find places in your home where the temperatures are between 35 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The part of your house might be a closet, it might be underneath the bed, or it might be a place where it's just dark and cool. Temperatures should be steady and do not fluctuate. The fluctuation of the temperatures is what causes our documents to fail. So it's important that you find a place where the temperature is consistent. Store your records where humidity levels are 30 to 50% to slow the deterioration rate of the actual paper that your documents are written on. Our documents are constantly already deteriorating just as a natural form. And so we need to find ways to slow down that deterioration. And those ways are to keep your temperature levels and your humidity levels low and at a consistent level. Keep records and photographs out of the direct sunlight. Many of us like to frame our photographs and our documents and put them on our walls for display. Well, when we do that, and if we have these documents and photographs accessible to the sunlight, we may be surprised to find that the sunlight is going to damage our photographs and our documents irrevocably. This particular photograph here is a photo of my third great-grandfather, Benjamin DeBolt. This photograph has actually been very much damaged by the sunlight. And so I would encourage you that if you have original documents and photographs on your walls, to please remove them, make really good copies of those documents and photographs, and put the copies back in the frames and preserve the originals. Tips from an insurance adjuster. My husband was an insurance adjuster for over 20 years. And as you can imagine, he had to deal with many type disasters that he had to deal with his insured. And so I would give you some suggestions that he's given me over the years about how to protect things in your home. Again, never frame original photographs, obtain really good copies, and frame the copies. These photos that you see here are actual framed photographs that are on my walls and on the tables in my office. And these are all copies. These are not originals. In this day and time, with the copiers that we have that make such great and wonderful copies, I would encourage you to make copies of photographs and documents and frame those and put away the originals. Do not leave burning candles unattended. Consider using a candle warmer or actually no candles at all. I can tell you that my husband has attended many, many house fires where the house is completely burnt to the ground and the people are standing in their front yard. And the first thing they say is, "Oh, my photographs. I did not get them off the walls. I didn't get them off the tables. I didn't get my photo albums." So, and many times the reason for these house fires was because of unattended burning candles. So it's important that maybe you always watch your candles, stay with them if you're going to leave them for anything, to blow them out. Never leave the clothes dryer running while away from home or sleeping. My husband has attended many fires where the clothes dryer has caught on fire while the people are away from their home or they were sleeping. And so it's important that we don't let things like this run while we cannot attend to them. Never leave the dishwasher or clothes washer running while you're away from your home or while you're sleeping. All it takes is one puncture in a hose or one overflow, and you have flooded your home. And if you're there when it starts to happen, you can stop it immediately. So it's important to not let these things be running while you're not there or not paying attention. If you have space or wall heaters, do not leave anything lying on top of them or in front of them, especially boxes of records. Because in the summertime when they're not being used, we don't think about it. But in the wintertime when it starts to get cold, they'll kick on and that heat can actually start fires with whatever's leaning up against it or laying on top of it. So it's important that we take care of our space and wall heaters. Keep our Christmas trees well hydrated. We just had Christmas a couple of months ago, and many of you use live trees, and they can be very beautiful. But you need to remember to keep your trees well hydrated, or they can catch fire if you're using electric lights on them, which can cause your house to catch fire. So let's make sure our Christmas trees are well hydrated if we use live Christmas trees. Do not leave boxes of photographs or documents on the floor. Store them on shelves, even if they're just a couple of inches off the floor. This way, if for some reason your house floods, the flooding waters do not get to those records. It's always important to keep records of boxes of records off the floor. We do this in the archives before we leave every day from work. We make sure that there are no boxes on the floor that can be damaged by any kind of anything during the night. Do not overload extension cords. I'm sure you've heard this many, many times, but you need to pay attention to what is plugged into your wall sockets and your electronics and make sure that you're not overloading any wall sockets or cords. None of us want to experience any kind of a disaster, whether that's a natural one or a man-made one, because that disaster could possibly damage or destroy genealogical records. So putting a disaster plan in place and making sure your genealogical records are safe is our only option. Thank you. This has been Melissa Barker, the Certified Archives Manager and the Archive Lady. Thank you so much for attending this presentation. Please visit my blog, A Genealogist in the Archives, at this link right here, and also visit me, the Archive Lady, on Facebook. You can just search Facebook for the Archive Lady and you will sure to find me. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation and have a great day.